Today on Newsgirls, Washington's pre-inauguration chaos,
accusations of election interference, Elon starting a MAGA civil war, Trump proposing U.S. expansion.
We're going to catch you up on everything that you might have missed over the holidays. Apple drowns in privacy abuse lawsuits. An appealing quality of iCloud is the ability to unshare an iCloud link, which allows predators to kind of cover their tracks.
Well, what about the children who had no choice and their privacy being violated and continuing to be by Apple's services?
And the new eye color change surgery, a needle or a laser to make space in a patient's cornea and then injects dye into them.
We spoke to one of only a handful of doctors in the US to offer this eye color change tattooing. Welcome to Newsgirls. I'm Wren.
And I'm Mabel. It's so nice to be reunited and back in the studio.
Yay, happy 2025. New year, Newsgirls.
Oh, okay. Well, let's get into the stories.
So we might have enjoyed a relaxing holiday break, but I can tell you who didn't: Washington. From new accusations of election interference to Elon starting a MAGA civil war to Trump proposing U.S. expansion, there's a lot of political news to get into today.
Yes, we're going to catch you up on everything that you might have missed over the holidays, starting with all the drama in Congress last week. So the Republicans hold one of the slimmest majorities in congressional history, but despite all the odds, Mike Johnson narrowly held on to his position as Speaker of the House.
Yeah, it really seemed like he was going to lose the first round of voting because 3 Republican reps voted against him, but then Johnson mysteriously took them into a back room, called President-elect Trump on the phone, and when they all emerged, 2 of the reps changed their vote to Johnson.
And because of that, Trump's victory was certified on Monday, which was the 4-year anniversary of January 6th. And because of that, the ceremony was pretty intense. The Capitol was on full lockdown. There was tall black metal fencing and a lot of security.
Yeah, that was crazy to see. The House also passed a rules package, which basically outlines what their priorities are for this session of Congress. And they're fast-tracking bills that will prohibit a moratorium on fracking, elevate fentanyl's substance classification, and completely close the Office of Diversity and Inclusion.
They're also giving schools Title IX protections, which protects students from sexual harassment, only if the school recognizes that there are 2 sexes, male or female, that are identified at birth.
That's definitely going to get some backlash. Also happening now are confirmation hearings for Trump's administration nominees.
And it's about time. It feels like we've been waiting on that for a really long time.
I know, and some of them are so controversial. Pete Hegseth was accused of assault and said women shouldn't be in combat roles. RFK, as you know from Newsgirls, has a long history of vaccine skepticism, and Tulsi Gabbard literally met with Bashar al-Assad. So it's unclear if they're even going to win over all the senators in their own party, and they can only afford to lose 3.
And because the confirmations are so high stake and the proceedings are expected to be intense, Trump's chief of staff sent the nominees some interesting orders to completely stop posting on their social media.
Are they allowed to tell them that?
Yeah, I guess they really don't want to take the chances of someone posting something that looks really bad and then that's used against them in the hearings.
And surprisingly, this isn't a response to Elon's latest social media visa ruckus, because the department he'll be heading under Trump, DOGE, isn't an official entity, so it doesn't need Senate confirmation.
Yes, so let's get into all the infighting that's been going on over H-1B visas, which are for skilled foreign workers in specialized fields like business and tech.
For context, H-1Bs allow 65,000 foreign workers to stay in the country, and it's a complete random lottery right now to get one.
So this all started when far-right activist Laura Loomer, who has actually traveled with Trump during his campaign, started criticizing one of Trump's policy advisors, who was born in India, and he basically wanted to make it easier for skilled foreign workers around the world to come to the US. And in this situation, she even described Indians as third world invaders with low IQs.
And this ignited an all-out war in the MAGA world. So Vivek Ramaswamy argued back that we need foreign workers to fuel companies. He said American culture has venerated mediocrity over excellence for too long.
Then, of course, Elon Musk entered the conversation. He actually once had an H-1B visa himself and now uses it to employ thousands of Tesla workers. And he believes that recruiting foreign workers, especially in engineering, is necessary. He even posted, if you want your team to win the championship, you need to recruit top talent wherever they may be.
But then as the infighting intensified, Elon's responses got more and more
aggressive, crazy, unhinged.
Let's go with aggressive. He told one ex-user who challenged him to take a big step back and F yourself in the face. I will go to war on this issue, the likes of which you cannot possibly comprehend. He even liked a post that said Americans are too retarded to fill the country's tech workforce.
Literally, how is that even allowed? And then Steve Bannon, TBT, replied to Musk, "Someone please notify Child Protective Services. Need to do a wellness check on this toddler." So
you know it's bad when Steve Bannon calls you a toddler. So everyone was waiting to see who would Trump side with, and he ended up making a statement. "I've always liked these visas. I have many H-1B visas on my properties." But that confused people because Trump actually mainly has H-2B visas, which are for what's considered less skilled workers like gardeners or housekeepers. So it's unclear who at his hotels would even need an H-1B.
Yeah, there are some inconsistencies on his position on the whole thing, because when he was campaigning in 2016, he was against the H-1B program and said that it was, quote, very bad for workers and that we should end it. But on a June episode of the All In podcast, Trump said,
"What I want to do and what I will do is you graduate from a college, I think you should get automatically as part of your diploma a green card to be able to stay in this country."
Which sent shockwaves through his party and the tech world.
So that means for this visa debate, it's Trump, Elon, and Vivek versus OG MAGA, Loomer, Bannon, and a surprising ally, Bernie Sanders.
Yes. So Bernie said Elon Musk is wrong. The main function of the H-1B visa program is to replace good-paying American jobs with low-wage indentured servants from abroad. The cheaper the labor they hire, the more money the billionaires make.
So Bernie sided with MAGA? Like, this is one of those examples of going so far left and so far right that you end up in the same place.
And this whole saga is a great example of just how powerful Elon's posts are. Just like his ex-post about a funding bill almost caused a government shutdown a couple weeks ago, but we don't even have the time to get into that right now.
But we're not done with the Trump dates, because he's been truth socialing up a storm about expanding U.S. territory. Like, it's unclear if this is a joke or not, but it started with Greenland.
Yes, he has wanted to buy it since 2019, and I guess hasn't let go of the idea. Trump posted that ownership and control of Greenland is an absolute necessity for U.S. national security. And Greenland is an autonomous Arctic territory of Denmark. And of course, in response to his post, neither the Prime Minister of Greenland or Denmark were on board with this idea.
Fair enough. But we can assume Trump is interested because Greenland is actually strategically important for the United States. It lies on the shortest route from North America to Europe. We actually have a military base there. And Greenland has oil and major mineral reserves. And the Washington Post estimates that if the island were for sale, it would cost $1.7 trillion.
But it's not. And actually, the Danish government announced a huge boost in defense spending for Greenland hours after Trump's post.
Trump made headlines again when he posted a bizarre Christmas Day message. So he said, "Wishing a Merry Christmas to all, including the wonderful soldiers of China who are lovingly but illegally operating the Panama Canal." So presumably he said this because China has been investing a lot in the region and the two countries are close allies. But in response, the Panamanian president said Trump's accusation is nonsense and that there's not a single Chinese soldier in the canal.
Yes, so Trump wants to buy the Panama Canal.
The fees being charged by Panama are ridiculous, especially knowing the extraordinary generosity that has been bestowed to Panama, I say very foolishly, by the United States.
So he obviously is saying that Panama charges too high of rates for crossing, which a lot of experts actually agree with. And the canal was actually originally created by the U.S. and then given to Panama. And now it's critical for the U.S., especially for trade with Asia. But Trump is posting that if Panama doesn't operate in good faith, the U.S. will demand that the Panama Canal be returned to us in full, quickly, and without question.
And even though Panama says its independence is non-negotiable, Trump refuses to back down, replying, "We'll see about that," and posting a picture of the canal with the caption, "Welcome to the United States Canal."
Cute.
On a more serious note, I'm sure we're all aware of the horrific terror attack that killed 14 people in New Orleans on New Year's Day. The suspect was an American Army vet who lived in Texas and carried an ISIS flag with him.
And all of this information on his background wasn't immediately unveiled. So in the meantime, when everyone was speculating, things got a little crazy and misinformation started to run rampant.
So we're hearing that the vehicle was traced to coming across from Mexico into the United States at Eagle Pass, Texas, 2 days ago. To be clear, we don't 100% know that this man, and we do know the suspect is a man, was the person driving that crossed the border.
So right after this Fox report, Trump and some Republicans took to social media and started to blame migrants and the border for the attack.
Trump posted on Truth Social, "When I said that the criminals coming in are far worse than the criminals we have in our country, that statement was constantly refuted by Democrats and the fake news media, but it turned out to be true." Well, no, it didn't, at least not in this case, because the suspect was born in the US and used a rental car.
And it was concerning to see the hate-fueled speech about migrants that caught fire because it was based off of literal misinformation. But regardless, this attack was a horrific incident, and we are sending our thoughts and love to the affected families.
Shifting gears to Biden, the Treasury Department announced new sanctions against Iranian and Russian entities for trying to interfere in the 2024 election. I guess they used AI to spread false information.
The intelligence community assessed that while Iran was probably trying to aid Harris, Russia was trying to aid Trump. And all in all, these sanctions are against minor entities. They're not against like all of Iran or all of Russia. So there aren't expected to be huge economic or geopolitical effects. But what this does show is that there is a quickly deteriorating relationship between US and its two major adversaries.
The sanctions surprisingly didn't target China, even though US intelligence has also pinpointed they tried to interfere in the election. So with only a couple weeks left in Biden's presidency, he is racing to hit everything on his checklist, including a couple historic trips.
Yes, like to Angola, where he pledged $1 billion in humanitarian assistance to 31 African countries. He also went to the Amazon rainforest, which is the first time that a US president has ever been.
I'm so shocked no president's ever been to the Amazon rainforest.
I know, I would have thought that someone would have made the trip by now, but he is the first, and there he pledged billions to help countries around the Amazon against climate change. But we'll see if any of this money makes it out the door because it's basically up to Trump now.
Biden also commuted the sentences of 1,500 Americans in one day, which is a single-day record.
Earlier this week, he also commuted the sentences of 37 of the 40 people who are on federal death row to life without parole.
And he signed likely his last piece of major legislation, which is the Social Security Fairness Act, which opens up full Social Security benefits to 3 million public sector workers who previously only got partial benefits.
Biden, to protect federal waters, also ban new offshore oil and gas developments along most U.S. coastlines. And again, it'll be interesting to see what happens because Trump has vowed to boost domestic energy production and reverse Biden's conservation efforts.
Biden has clearly taken a public step back lately, but we will actually see him today when he gives Carter's eulogy.
Trump is also planning on attending the funeral, and this is interesting. Since U.S. code mandates that flags be flown at half staff for 30 days following a president's death, the flag will be at half staff for Trump's inauguration, which he is obviously not happy about.
No, he posted, "The Democrats are all giddy about our magnificent American flag potentially being at half-mast during my inauguration. No one wants to see this, and no American can be happy about it." I think he means half staff, since half mast only applies to flags on boats.
Oh, well, he needs a Newsgirls fact check on that Truth Social post. A couple things to look out for this week. So the Supreme Court is going to be hearing arguments for the looming TikTok ban starting tomorrow.
Also tomorrow, Trump will be sentenced in the hush money case, allegedly paying Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election, even though he is expected to challenge it. But the judge has said he will not be giving Trump jail time. But this means Trump will officially be a convicted felon when he takes office on the 20th, because under New York law, you're not a felon until you're sentenced.
And that's not to be confused with Trump's appeal in his sexual abuse case with E. Jean Carroll. The federal appeals court last week upheld his $5 million verdict.
And now you're all caught up. Hey Siri.
Hi.
Do you record what I say to you?
I respect your privacy and only listen when you're talking to me. You can learn about Apple's approach to privacy on apple.com.
Interesting, because last week, Apple agreed to pay a $95 million class action lawsuit that claimed that Siri violated user privacy by secretly recording conversations according to court documents.
And this is a huge deal because the lawsuit alleges that Apple shared these recordings with advertisers so they could better target their products.
That sounds illegal, and there were some pretty interesting examples cited in the case. Like, 2 plaintiffs said that when they mentioned Air Jordans or Olive Garden restaurants, that triggered those ads. And another said that he got ads for a specific surgical treatment after discussing it, he thought, privately with his doctor.
And basically all of us who have used an iPhone or MacBook or iPad with Siri activated in the last 10 years could get money from the settlement. You'd get a whopping $20 per device for up to 5 devices.
Oh, nice. You can buy like half an Apple charger with that. The case has been going on for 5 years, and the final settlement is surprisingly low because $95 million is literally 9 hours of profit for Apple.
Well, maybe it's low because Apple doesn't admit any wrongdoing and maintains they do not sell recordings of their users to advertisers.
Which is interesting because in 2019, Apple even apologized for how it handled recordings. And a whistleblower even told The Guardian that Siri was way too easily activated. It could even be triggered from the sound of a zipper. I actually activated mine just now.
Oh, yeah. Apple prides itself on privacy. It's a central part of their brand, or so they say at least. CEO Tim Cook calls it a fight to preserve a fundamental human right.
Privacy is hugely important to us. It's a key value of our company. We're holding that information on your device encrypted, so it is yours.
You're doing what you can to help, if necessary, national security, law enforcement, or whatever, to do the job that they have to do.
Yes.
Completely comfortable.
Very.
And so today we're going to explore whether Apple is actually the champion of user privacy that they claim to be, and whether their emphasis on privacy is a way to cop out on user safety.
The best way to analyze this is through a lawsuit that was just filed last month against Apple. A group of victims is seeking more than $1.2 billion in damages, claiming Apple allowed child sex abuse material, or CSAM, to proliferate on iCloud without Apple doing anything about it.
There are roughly 2,600 people in this case who were abused as children, and those photos and videos have existed on iCloud for years. And Apple knows this is happening. We found a text chain from their chief fraud executive in 2020, where he's basically talking about how Facebook focuses on trust and safety, but in privacy, quote, they suck. Apple's priorities are the inverse, which is why we are the greatest platform for distributing child porn.
And the victim stories are disturbing. The New York Times interviewed a woman who they only identified as a 27-year-old from the Northeast who was abused by a male relative starting when she was an infant, and he took photos of the abuse and swapped them with other men online. He was eventually arrested and sent to prison, but these photos live on.
For more than a decade, the victim receives dozens of notifications every day from authorities saying that they found her images online, many of which are stored in iCloud. And what she says bothers her the most is just knowing that these predators use these images of her to kind of show other children that abuse is normal.
And because of these notifications and knowing that people are viewing these images of her, she's forced to constantly relive her trauma. She was afraid to even join this lawsuit because what if someone who's seen them recognizes her? But she thinks it's time for Apple to change.
And a damning piece of evidence in this lawsuit kind of showing that Apple is at fault is that they have clearly acknowledged that this issue has existed for a while. So Apple actually introduced a program to identify and report CSAM in the past.
Right. In 2021, Apple had unveiled a tool that allowed it to scan for illegal images of child abuse. But it quickly abandoned that tool after facing criticism from cybersecurity experts. So the victims in this lawsuit say that the company broke its promise to protect victims.
The system uses a neural hash, which basically analyzes an image and then converts that image to a unique number, and only another image that's completely identical to that image produces that same number. So then Apple uses that to create a database that they then share with groups like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They then compare those digital signatures and flag matches to federal agencies.
But then digital rights groups warned that this tool would compromise the privacy and security of iCloud users and basically create a backdoor for governments to come in. So the company dropped its plan, saying it's almost impossible to scan iCloud photos without imperiling the security and privacy of our users.
And Apple has a long history of saying that they are prioritizing user privacy over clearly other things. Like in 2009, Microsoft created a software system called PhotoDNA to recognize photos, even altered ones, and then compare them against a database of known illegal images. And so Google, Facebook, even Snapchat uses it.
But Apple rejected PhotoDNA or doing any widespread scanning like its peers. And because of that, in just 2023 alone, Google and Facebook each filed more than 1 million reports of flagged content. Apple filed only 267.
That's literally such a bad look for Apple. It is the world's largest company. There are 2.2 billion active Apple devices, and they're such a big innovator in so many spaces, but this is clearly something that they have chosen not to prioritize. And a quick refresher, iCloud launched in 2011 and kind of acts like a digital warehouse even for illicit material. And an appealing quality of iCloud is the ability to unshare an iCloud link, which allows CSAM predators to kind of cover their tracks after they send and receive material.
So this current iCloud lawsuit says that Apple has essentially been selling defective products that harmed a whole class of customers, mainly child sexual abuse victims. They keep saying they don't want to scan for CSAM because it violates their users' privacy. Well, what about the children who had no choice in their privacy being violated and continuing to be by Apple's services? Like, don't they want to protect them?
Yeah, like their privacy claim ignores an entire subset of users, and Apple might actually start having to pay for it because this current lawsuit's scope and financial impact could force Apple into years of litigation over an issue that they have tried to ignore.
And this isn't the first lawsuit of its kind. In August last year, a 9-year-old girl from North Carolina sued Apple after strangers sent her CSAM through iCloud links and encouraged her to film and record her own nude videos. The lawsuit says Apple creates the false narrative that by detecting and deterring CSAM, it would run the risk of violating other users' privacy, even though other tech companies have deployed technology to disrupt distribution.
But Apple filed a motion to completely dismiss the case, saying that iCloud can't be subject to a product liability case because it's not a product like a defective tire or something, and that the Communications Decency Act protects them from liability. They also point to new safety features that are supposed to limit the spread of illegal photos.
Yeah, so let's break that down. A couple months ago, Apple started testing this new feature that prompts kids to report when they receive explicit content. Basically, when Apple identifies that they've received a nude photo or something, it sends them a pop-up with options to message a grown-up, get resources for help, block the contact, or send a report to Apple, which then Apple sends to law enforcement.
Okay, like a pop-up to send a report or go get a grown-up does not seem like an advanced enough feature to address this issue, and critics say the same since minors can just bypass the report and see the material.
It also says on the pop-up that if you choose to send the report, your name and personal information and the name and information of the person who sent it to you will be included in the report. Like, that could completely scare away a kid.
And I guess the question is, why hasn't Apple done more? Like, what is the benefit for them here? They have all of these lawsuits against them. They look really bad compared to other tech companies. Like, why do they think that they're exempt?
Well, I don't want to be too cynical, but could it be that they want to keep making money off their users and don't want to turn them away? Like, they charge anywhere from 99 cents to $60 per month for an iCloud subscription, and iCloud is expected to generate $11 billion this year.
Looking at these two cases side by side is so interesting because on one hand, with the Siri case, Apple is violating user privacy by illegally, selling user data to third parties and advertisers. And on the other hand, with the iCloud case, they are valuing user privacy so much that they're violating the trust and safety of kids. So it's kind of hard to know what side of the privacy spectrum Apple truly lands on.
So I thought I'd heard of all the craziest cosmetic procedures. I knew about dimpleplasty, which makes incisions on your cheeks to give you dimples. I knew about rib removal to make your waist smaller, or leg lengthening, which puts little spacers in between your bones to stretch them.
But the new surgery on the block is where people can surgically change the color of their eyes. So keratopigmentation is basically where a surgeon uses a needle or a laser to make space in a patient's cornea and then injects dye into them to change the color. So it's basically like tattooing your eyes.
It sounds so painful, even though they say it isn't. And I guess patients can choose from colors like emerald green or honey gold or ocean blue. Okay, see, this one looks really natural.
It looks good on her.
Blue eyes fit her.
But this one is kind of crazy.
I know, it just doesn't look like a real eyeball.
No, it looks like intense contacts.
Eyes that blue just aren't real.
I guess if you're undergoing this kind of surgery, you do want it to be as bright as possible.
The ones that are natural, like, really look real, though. And I guess it's just a quick 30-minute procedure, and the results are immediate, and you're awake and conscious the whole time.
I was so surprised that it was so quick. I read this testimonial of a guy who said that he was in and out before his wife even got her nails done. But I don't know, it sounds pretty intense. Like, I can't even put contacts in my eyes.
You're giving Rachel from Friends.
I want you to take these drops 3 times a day for a week, and you'll be as good as new.
Yeah, no, I don't put things in my eye.
Okay, then. I guess we'll see you back here in 3 months.
Great.
And I'll fit you for a glass eye.
Okay, just give me the damn drops.
And the original purpose of eye tattooing was to cover scars on the eyes or to add a cornea to a white or blind eye, or to patch holes in the cornea from like a wound or botched procedure. But for cosmetic purposes, it's not FDA approved and has not gone through clinical trials.
And since the tools and dyes and everything are FDA approved, you can still get keratopigmentation, but off label, which means that the patient has to assume the risk. They also have to pay the $12,000 themselves without any help from insurance, but that still hasn't stopped thousands of patients from getting it.
So we spoke to Dr. Nick Sarli of Manhattan LASIK Center, who's one of only a handful of doctors in the US to offer this eye color change tattooing. So just to start, could you walk us through how the procedure works?
So in essence, we use a laser, which we use for vision correction procedures. We create a channel on the very front dome of the eye, which is the cornea, right? You can visualize that. And so we don't touch anything on the inner part of the eye. We go in and add some pigment of desired color.
We see that this is a relatively new procedure, especially in the US. Can you kind of tell us about what got you interested in this in the first place and how you started?
So we've been watching this procedure remotely from our overseas peers, mainly in France and Spain. Over long term, it was relatively safe. And since I also had the most experience with this particular laser that's used in this procedure, I'm the person to really start dabbling with this. So I decided to give it a shot.
Wow. And what did your patients tell you is the reason that they want to change their eye color?
Good question. So most of our patients have already been wearing color contact lenses for the majority of their lives. Many of them first thing in the morning until they go to sleep at night. They are essentially tired of dealing with the contacts, sometimes the complications of that. And then we have about another 25-30% who never wore colored contact lenses, but they just wanted to have colored eyes all their lives, and they want to realize that dream.
And how do they feel after? Like, what do they say to you when they look in the mirror for the first time?
It's a life-changing procedure. We thought that refractive surgery for eyeglasses was life-changing, but this is more of a life-changing because this changes their attitude, their appearance, how they see themselves first thing in the morning in the mirror.
And we've seen a lot of coverage about this pretty recently. Is this something that you've noticed like growing?
Yes, so it has been growing gradually. In the 3 calendar years we've been performing, we've done hundreds of procedures, close to 1,000 cases now. You would imagine would be more women as far as, aesthetics, but we have a good percentage of male customers as well. If I had to break down, I would probably say 40% male, 60% ladies.
Wow.
And we learned that it was introduced in the US in 2019, which is pretty recently, but has been performed in Europe for the past 15 years.
But people have been trying to change the color of their eyes for a long time. Like 2,000 years ago, the Greeks used crushed pomegranate bark to try to change the pigment of their eyes.
And people have been wearing colored eye contacts since the 1940s. But I guess we're seeing this trend in more people wanting to make permanent beauty alterations to kind of lessen their day-to-day upkeep. And that also applies to eye colors.
And eye tattooing is actually one of 3 ways to permanently change the color of your eyes. There's also iris implantation, which is where a silicone implant is inserted between the sclera and cornea of your eye. And then there's laser depigmentation, which uses a laser to basically fry the natural melanin of your eye to a lighter color.
And even though ophthalmologists consider eye tattooing as the safest of those 3 procedures, it's still associated with a lot of risks. So last year, the American Academy of Ophthalmology issued a warning about the risks like dye leakage, potential infection, light sensitivity, and damage to the cornea that could lead to cloudiness, vision loss, or even blindness.
There are also no studies of the long-term effects of this dye on the eye since it's only been around for less than 20 years. So for all these reasons, most eye doctors don't recommend eye tattooing unless it's functionally necessary.
So if you really want to change your eye color, most experts recommend less invasive options like FDA-approved colored contacts.
And are there any risks to the eye associated with this procedure?
If it's carefully performed, in our hands, we had very good outcomes. We had no sight-threatening issues post-operatively.
And like you mentioned, this is pretty new to the US. Did you face any backlash from the medical community when you started performing this?
We don't really advertise this heavily. We try to rely on our internal patient base that we've accumulated over the last 3 decades of performing refractive surgery. As a result, we haven't faced any direct backlash. But the general community may not be very comfortable with the whole idea of this being a super elective procedure.
We saw in our research it's not FDA approved for this cosmetic purpose.
It will probably never be FDA approved because of the sheer number of patients that we're dealing with. There aren't going to be enough numbers for the FDA to probably even evaluate and follow over time.
Doctors who perform this surgery say that typical patients are likely to also have undergone other cosmetic procedures. This was interesting. Roughly 80% also have veneers.
Well, I guess if you're changing your eye color, teeth are nothing.
This seems so weird, I guess, because eyes feel just so inherently personal, and I guess this procedure is pretty new. But in the grand scheme of everything, people change their hair and like skin color with tanner and bodies. So maybe in a couple years, this will feel really normal and just like the rest.
Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode.
Tune in next week to learn about how a South Korean movement made its way to the US and how VR goggles are now being used as evidence in criminal cases.
Bye.